Welcome back to the Sully Scoop, where three lifelong Husker bros dive in depth on all surrounding the new era of Husker football, where our cups never run dry of the Rhule-Aid under head coach Matt Rhule, made by fans for fans with BSul, BSul, and TSul. The Sully Scoop is the official Nebraska Cornhusker football podcast brought to you by Big Banter. We are back on your favorite Cornhusker podcast. That's the Sully Scoop. And if you can't already tell, better emotions coming into this podcast here because the Huskers came out on top finally for the first time this year, taking down the NIU Huskies at home at Memorial Stadium. First home game, and the Huskers come out on top.
Yeah, it's about time, BSul. And, it just feels good to finally take care of business when Nebraska's expected to take care of business. We had two tough matchups to start the season at Minnesota, at Colorado. So it's nice to just come home and just start everything off the right way. And the number one thing to note is the fact that it was Harbaugh who got the start in place of the injured Jeff Sims. So Jeff Sims didn't play and the Huskers win.
As BSul would say, you hit the nail on the head there, TSul. Big opportunity coming for Harbaugh there. He's a hometown hero from Lincoln, or in the area, pretty much Lincoln, if you're asking me. He's one of the guys that got a full ride scholarship. Nobody in Nebraska, in Lincoln, has gotten a full ride in 20 years since Harbaugh got the full ride. I think it showed that he played with his heart. Yes, he did come out with one fumble, but you know what? I would put it more on the offensive line, but I'm blaming Sims for all of his fumbles. I'm going to blame Harbaugh, but that is why Harbaugh gets the win as well, and Jeff Sims is taking all those L's.
Now, I think there's two important parts here for you both to remember and focus in on. Harbaugh played very well, yes. The other thing that really stands out to me is he was our leading rusher in the game, both in carries and total yardage. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I don't love a running quarterback. That's something that Nebraska's built their foundation on and had success with in the past. But that is not a recipe for success in today's college football. Those guys take too many hits, and especially now we got a guy who in theory can hang on to the ball aside from one bad block. He would have played a turnover free game. So I just would love to see the offense with Satterfield and Matt Rhule call a little bit cleaner game for Harbaugh, where he's not the leading rusher, where he has a little more flexibility to give the ball to the running backs.
See, I disagree. I disagree with you. If he is your best playmaker, let him run the ball. If he is picking up first down after first down, let him run the ball. I do not care. Guess what?
Now, BSul, are you saying Harbaugh is the best playmaker on the team? Is that what I just heard?
He looked like the best playmaker on Saturday. Let me tell you, he led the team in carries for a reason, had the most yards on the ground, and oh my, was he the first quarterback to lead this team to a win this year? Yes, he was. Now, do I think Jeff Sims would take down NIU? I sure hope so. But if you write 4 turnovers right next to his name, I am not sure that's going to happen. Guess what? Harbaugh only gave the ball away one time, and it happened to be in the red zone where our defense locked down and only gave up 3 points. However, Harbaugh turned the game around and had the momentum and showed that he could play in front of the hometown crowd.
Yeah, BSul, I'm with you. I was gonna clap right at BSul too, and the fact that if your best playmaker is gonna be your running quarterback, you go with it. And in today's world, that works.
Wow, hold on,
NFL
you're saying now you were locking in. You're officially saying Harbaugh's the best playmaker on offense.
I am not saying that.
Then who's the best playmaker on offense there?
It was your boy Gabe Ervin until he went down with an injury.
So he went down with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Correct me if I'm wrong, but still had 7 less carries than Harbaugh.
Well, BSul, again,
Harbaugh wasn't playing with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter.
BSul, if they were keying on Gabe Ervin, then yeah, the quarterback should take it himself. If it's open, you take it, you move the chains, and you keep the drive alive. And ultimately, when you're playing somebody like NIU, you don't prance around and get cute. You go right at them, you end the game, you get off the field. Simple as that.
I'm not arguing that you take it right at him and you run the ball, you control the clock, and you win the game. That is the recipe for success. All I'm telling you is I don't feel that our quarterback, especially our backup quarterback, should be your leading rusher in total carries. If he led the team in yardage on less carries, that's a different story. That means he's getting big plays and he's breaking some long runs. He led the team in carries by a large margin, which tells me that nobody else was really getting anything going, that he was the only guy out there trying to run through people.
How do you think touchdown Tommy ran college football back in 95 for the Huskers? He ran the ball. He used his ability with his legs because that is his best attribute to help the team win the game. Listen, if it's the backup quarterback that's in there, I don't care. Use his best ability, which is his legs. We all saw his arm talent. Use his legs and let him do some work. And once the coaches tell him not to look to run and he's sitting back in the pocket to pass, that's what we saw with Taylor Martinez, Adrian Martinez, Tommy Armstrong. I mean, it was year in, year out. Guys,
now hold on a second there,
the
JSul, because Tommy Armstrong had a hell of an arm.
He was an okay thrower. I mean, you could say he had a hell of an arm. How was he doing in the NFL? Not too well because he didn't make it, because he didn't have a hell of an arm. He had a hell of an arm compared to Taylor Martinez, Adrian Martinez, and even now.
Compared to Nebraska quarterbacks in the last 15 years.
And how many have turned out? How many have turned out to be NFL quarterbacks?
Well, there's our first problem.
Exactly. That's why. And guess what?
We
never had NFL quarterbacks like that. Nobody cares about.
Your buddy Tanner Lee made it to the league, JSul. He got drafted. He made it to the league. And ultimately, I would say he was the worst quarterback out of all the groups that were playing back then.
Turnover, Tanner. Yes, he made it to the league, but no, he never played on a Sunday in his life. Guess what? Back when the Huskers were winning all these championships, they did not have a passing quarterback there, BSul. You want to know what they had? They had a running quarterback that wasn't afraid to run the ball, and that's how they ended up controlling the clock. And it comes down to the offensive line who was in front of him, but they allowed the quarterback to use his best attribute, which was his legs.
Now, Jason, I like the take, except for the fact of how you're comparing Harbaugh to Tommy Frazier, because again, that was like your idiotic take. That was your idiotic take of saying that Mike Riley compared to Nick Saban. Two names that shouldn't be mentioned in the same sentence.
I never compared those two.
Again.
I never compared those two. I just want you to know that.
I think all the scoopers remember you comparing the two. What was it, only like a month ago?
I have never
I don't even know that it was that long ago.
I have never compared Mike Riley to Nick Saban.
For everybody who seems to have amnesia or can't remember, JSul was saying that Mike Riley was as good as Nebraska as Nick Saban was for Alabama.
That's, yep,
100%. That's a hot take in and of itself. And speaking of hot takes, T-Sul, we got some news this morning after the game on the Monday morning wrap-up from Coach Rhule. And how do you feel that your first hot take about Gabe Ervin getting 7 touchdowns by Michigan is not going to come true since we got the news of his season-ending hip surgery?
BSul, I'm hot on this one. And that's because I think our offensive coordinator is a moron. Because when you have a guy like Gabe Ervin out there and you're not handing him the football against Colorado, you have to be an idiot in the second half. And ultimately, that's what I'm calling our offensive coordinator. Unless he figures out that, hey, Jeff Sims can't throw the football or hang on to the football, you better give it to your best athlete as a running back. And now we're going to have to deal with Anthony Grant, because ultimately, Gabe Ervin scored a touchdown against Minnesota. We all saw it, so don't even say he didn't get that touchdown. And he should have probably had at least another touchdown in that game, because they should have featured him instead of Anthony Grant. And Colorado, he should have had at least 2 or 3 touchdowns in that game. He did finally have one against Northern Illinois, but again, why were we not giving him the football more than the quarterback, as BSul was touching on earlier? And we can only assume against Louisiana Tech that Gabe Ervin scored 4 touchdowns if I was the offensive coordinator. So yeah, BSul, that was a hot take in itself, and I feel really bad for Gabe, and I hope that he comes back even stronger next year.
It's a tough blow to lose Gabe. But also out of that news, we lose two other guys. Ramir Johnson is also out for the season with shoulder surgery, and then also Dwight Boodle, who was starting to get a decent amount of looks on the defensive side, not just special teams anymore. He also is down for the year with shoulder surgery.
Well, B-side, notice how you ducked all of my comments about Satterfield, our offensive coordinator, and I want you to really dive in. Do you truly believe that Satterfield sets up our team to be the best offensive unit in the Big Ten?
No. And that's why I believe the reports where Rhule was calling the offensive plays this past season or this past game. And I really don't think that it looked that way. Satterfield seemed too excited on a couple of those touchdown runs to not be the one calling the plays. But the reports were Matt Rhule was taking over offensive play calling because Satterfield had let him down against Colorado in the second half.
He didn't just let him down. He let down the entire state of Nebraska with the just mind-boggling plays that he was calling in there. But the number one thing for me with this offense, if this offense is really going to just start, cooking on all cylinders, what is going on in that wide receiver room? And Jason, I'm looking at you and I'm blaming you for this because you're calling for Marcus Washington to be our offensive MVP. And I feel like none of the wide receivers have done anything mentionable this season, except for Fedone, who's now got a touchdown in the 2 straight games.
Yeah, T. So you're going to come out here and blame the wide receivers. Look at the quarterback group. They do not have any arm talent.
There was a different quarterback this week.
Yeah, and you have already been saying that he stinks at throwing the ball. Why are you coming out here trying to blame the wide receivers? Yeah, over and over again. Everyone has already heard it before. You do not trust this quarterback. You actually wanted Jeff Sims, Mr. Throws a Pick Sims. Wrong. Guess what? Sims doesn't know where the ball's going when he throws it. And Harburg can't throw a deep ball to save his life. This is just set up for failure for the wide receivers. They should just be stalk blocking the entire game. Let either Harburg or Sims run the option. And if they get an opportunity to pitch the ball, guess what? They could pitch it back in the past. Now when you got Anthony Grant out there, I do not want to see a pitch. Just run an option and keep it every time.
I think the biggest thing here is the offensive play calling on the passing side. They are not calling plays to feature any of the wide receivers. None of these guys can take the top off a defense. There's a couple freshmen who probably could, but they don't seem to have the playbook memorized enough to get out on the field. So you've got a handful of possession receivers who have decent speed, who are running best out of the slot or down the sideline, but they're not breaking away, which is why you're seeing Fedone finally get involved. Borkature in the first game of the season had a couple of good catches. I mean, that is just the tight ends are going to be the difference maker in the passing game, and that's about it. It's because nobody's taking the top off the defense, so the safeties can sit there and just watch the quarterback stare down his wide receivers.
When are we going to see Malachi Coleman was pretty much the question that BSul was just asking them. Look, he was one of the top recruits, the top guy coming out of Nebraska itself. Why is this guy not in the game? Guess what? He's a freshman. I don't care. He is a big body, and this guy has the ability. He apparently has the talent to be one of the top guys in the country. Why is he not getting a look when your team is 1-2 on the year?
And because not only apparently Alex Bullock is going to take the top off the defense.
And not only that, Jason, it's the fact that our offense seems to be out of rhythm and struggles to really get anything going except for Irvin. And now they're going to even have to figure that out since he's out for the season. We're going to have to figure out what other running backs want to step up and play. I mean, Emmett Johnson's going to get his first look of the season this week. And, hopefully he's hungry and ready for it because Anthony Grant is not, he's not cemented in as the number one. He's already shown he's got fumble problems. The coaches know he has fumble problems. So if anything like that arises, Emmett Johnson's going to take over as the number one. And, there's going to be guys underneath him who are looking to get in as well.
Now, T, you bring up a good point here. Emmett Johnson is a guy who I think really has a big opportunity to cement himself as possibly the top back. He could even jump Anthony Grant here in the next 2 games easily. Emmett Johnson is no slouch. In 2021, when he was recruited to the Huskers, granted he redshirted in 2022, he was Mr. Football in Minnesota. The guy played two ways, was a stellar running back, had 5,000 yards, 6,000 all-purpose yards. He big time playmaker, and it's going to be nice to hopefully see him get on the field, and let's see what you can do at the Division I level.
Could not
Can't disagree with that. I was there first there, T-Saw, and I could not disagree at all. I mean, Emmett Johnson has the ability to come out here and show some talent. I mean, if Gabe Irvin can run the ball and Anthony Grant can run the ball, this offensive line is getting a lot better than they were last year on the rushing side of it, but they gotta work on their pass block, and there's no reason that your quarterback should be getting hit, especially when you're in your own red zone. And
to dive into that, BSul, you're exactly right. Run blocking, this offensive line has really stepped up their game. They're creating holes and allowing these running backs and even the quarterbacks to make some decent runs because they are holding their blocks and they're taking those next steps. Pass protection is atrocious. I don't know that there's a single guy on this offensive line who has had a positive pass blocking game. In 3 games, every single one of the starting 5 has been atrocious. And for starters, the biggest disappointment on the offensive line is Turner Corcoran, who is getting an opportunity with Teddy being out right now. And he is just been a total letdown. For the top offensive lineman out of the state of Kansas, a year ago, 2 years ago, whenever that was, to come in and you can't hold a block as a left tackle is a joke.
all right, that's enough about this terrible offense. Everyone knows that's the worst part of the Huskers team. I want to talk about this defense coming out of this game. Listen, we have one of the best rushing defenses in the country. I mean, this is an NIU team that doesn't really have rushing in their scheme, but to only give up 26 yards on 22 attempts, that is a phenomenal job by this defense. It starts up front with the defensive line, who is playing outstanding and showing that they are dominant. And honestly, the biggest jump from last year. They made the biggest improvement from last year for this Husker team. And the defense only gave up 149 yards. And I think it starts with, when a play happens and it's on defense, they rally to the ball. It is outstanding to see how many guys get to the ball, even if it's on the other side of the field. The guy, if he breaks one tackle, he's getting lit up by 3 guys to where it's almost going to make him want to go down on the first guy to touch him.
BSul, and that's what gives me confidence in every single person who's a Husker fan in the country, because the Big Ten West, it ain't that good. And having a defense like this, you could come out of the West. I mean, Iowa has shown that to us that, they have if anything, their offense gives up more points than it scores in recent years. And, they still put up 8-9 wins a year coming out of the Big Ten West. So Nebraska definitely could with this defense. They still got to figure out the turnover game, but I love the pressure that they get and the run stuffing ability. And it all starts up front. And I got to give props to Big Dog out there who was calling for Nash Hutschmacher, because let's be honest, this guy is a freaking monster. Nobody can move him on the offensive line. When they are in an obvious pass situation, he still gets so much penetration up front. There's no stopping Nash. Nash is going to smash, I think is what Big Dog had mentioned. And I love having Ty Robinson. He's evolved. He's now 3-star Ty. He keeps this up, he's going to be 4- and 5-star Ty before you know it there, BSul. And, we got to give a shout out to BSul's guy as well in
Cameron Lenhart.
Yeah,
you better believe it, because this freshman is a stud. I called for him to be a stud. I called for him to be the playmaker of the defense, which he is leading with sacks. This guy is phenomenal. He is a true freshman, and he is a standout. And add him to those guys in Nash and, 1-star Ty, as T-Saw would call him. Yes, I think he brings out the best in Ty Robinson. Why? Because they are looking to double team him rather than Ty Robinson.
Yeah, I think the defense has been the biggest thing. But like T had said, they have to figure out how to create turnovers on defense. This defense is stout. They are not giving up yardage, but
I would disagree.
They aren't taking the ball away. You
I would
need to come
disagree.
up with. You need to come away with takeaways.
I disagree. I think this team is phenomenal where they are. Listen, they are getting a lot of stops and not letting a lot of rushing yards come at them. So when we take on Big Ten foes, guess what? That's what the Big Ten does. That's what they do best. They run the ball, they control the clock, and they get out of a game with a win. If they can't run the ball against the Huskers defense, guess what? They're going to be punting the ball. Regardless if we get it over in a turnover or we get it through a punt, we're still getting the ball back. It's going to come down to our offense holding on to the ball.
A turnover would give the Husker offense a short field to try and score. We've seen this team try to score from their side of the field, and it's not very successful. You put up 10 points against a terrible Minnesota team.
You cannot let the game linger on getting turnovers. That is like trusting that the other offense is going to get rid of the ball like the Huskers have been doing. You cannot focus on turnovers. You got to focus on the yardage and stopping them
I'm not saying focus straight on turnovers. I'm saying the defense needs to figure out how to create some opportunities. If they can take the ball away if they can take the ball away, give their offense positive yardage here, that's going to help the team evolve to take the next steps.
And they
are creating opportunities.
So you're going to just let BSul just drop something like that and not even touch on it? Did you even hear what he said? He said that terrible, quote unquote, that terrible Minnesota team. BSul, that's quite a hot take there, because I believe Minnesota with PJ Fleck is an 8-9 win team the last couple of years. And aren't they Sul's pick to win the West? And he's not even going to sit out here and defend them? You're just going to let BSul say they're a terrible team.
Well, BSul can say whatever he wants. He lives in a delusional world. My pick to win the West already beat his pick to win the West, and he's going at that team, saying that they are not that good, yet they are leading the West as of right now, but they do have to take on Michigan and Ohio State, which would be tough, but I do not think that a two-loss team. No, I do not think so. I think the winner of the West is going to have most likely 3 Big Ten losses. However, I do want to note making opportunities happen is called forcing Northern Illinois to punt the ball 9 times there, BSul. 9. That is creating opportunities, and that comes down to the defense. You can't trust a game on turnovers.
So just because a defense holds the team to punt the ball doesn't mean that the offense is put in a position where they're not going to turn around and punt the ball back. You've seen the way our offense you've seen the way that our offense plays. And once we get into Big Ten play, it's going to be punt, 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 punt.
Okay, so if we get the ball at our own 20 or get the ball at our own or get the ball at the 50, what is the difference if we can't get a first down? There is no difference, BSul. You want to know what makes
the difference is if you can pick up 10 yards, you've got a shot at kicking a field goal.
The more opportunities that the offense has the ball is going to make them much more successful. This defense is creating opportunities by not letting the other team score.
The defense has let the other team score, BSul. And you're talking
backups were in when they scored a touchdown and went for 2. That was our backups. Guess what? They did give up a field goal during the game, though. You want to know what that came down to? Our quarterback fumbling
I'm not just
the
talking
ball, and
against Northern Illinois. I'm talking all together.
They held Northern Illinois to a field goal from the 5-yard line.
I do want you to know about beating a MAC team.
Okay, let's go to Colorado. The offense fumbled the
ball
2 times. You don't want to argue
that one.
2 times.
And the defense got worn out because they didn't take the ball away. They continued to let Colorado.
You just blame the defense for the offense turning it over.
No, I'm telling you
that is what you just said. The defense was tired because they couldn't take the ball away. Even though they were forcing punts and getting stopped.
Because the defense continued to stay out on the field because they weren't taking the ball away. The offense would give the ball back, and the defense was just stuck out there because the offense kept turning the ball over.
Punt the ball. They forced them to punt the ball, and 2 plays later, the offense turns the ball over. How are you going to blame the defense?
But the defense has to jump out, jump routes, force fumbles. They have to create takeaways to give the offense more opportunities. That is the
All
name
right,
of the
you
game.
all heard it. Why don't the Huskers have 15 turnovers yet this year? We would be undefeated if the Huskers had 15 to 20 turnovers.
Probably
That's what we
would be.
need.
We would be
This is just ridiculous.
undefeated.
Then
Why
we'd
do
We'd
we
be
be
have a
undefeated
undefeated
turnover?
if the
crazy.
Huskers just were a little
Why
closer to
didn't-
being even in the turnover battle.
Why didn't well, that is because our quarterback, Jeff Sims, sucks. Next thing, why did the Huskers get a turnover every single time NIU had the ball? Maybe because our defense then just sucks that much that we didn't get a turnover
I
every single
never
time
said
they
the
had a drive.
defense sucks.
Yep, everyone heard it. The Huskers are 1-2, and it comes down to the defense not getting opportunities. Listen, it comes down to the defense not creating turnovers and not giving the ball back.
You're taking one small thing said and blowing it way out of proportion.
No, I am
there,
not.
Jay.
You are blaming the defense right now for the
I'm not
losses
blaming-
because
I'm not blaming
they
the
did not
defense for
create
the losses.
turnovers.
All I'm saying is the defense needs to learn how to take the ball away. This has been embarrassing. The last 5 years, the Huskers defense has not taken the ball away consistently.
So holding NIU to 26 yards on the ground is not a win.
I'm saying that's impressive, yes. However, you should have held NIU under 10 points and gotten the free runs for the fans.
Only giving up 11 points during the game is not impressive, especially when your backups gave up the touchdown and 2-point conversion. That's not
against
impressive.
a MAC team that you should have blown out even more.
They did blow them out, but you want to know why they didn't blow them out by more? I believe the offense stalled on many drives.
I
The
agree
defense,
with you.
How could the defense, make this a bigger margin? The defense is not out there to score points every time. They're out there to stop the other team from getting first downs and getting into the red zone and kicking field goals or scored touchdowns. Guess what this defense did? They did exactly that. This team would have had a shutout if it wasn't for the offense turning the ball over while NIU got it in the red zone to start at the 5-yard line, and this defense clutched up.
Now, Jay, so we all agree this is a MAC team. The defense played their hearts out. They're honestly the best feature on our football team. But
okay,
we're diving into the MAC game too much. The only fan base that beating a MAC team should impress would be Northwestern, Purdue, Illinois, Michigan State. Who am I missing?
So
Indiana.
I guess
Iowa.
it's not the only. I guess it's not. They're not the only then, because you named about 6 there.
Now, JSL, to give you a comparison here, let's take a look, because Ohio State played a lesser opponent this past week as well. They played Western Kentucky. Ohio State scored 63 points and gave up a total of 10 points. Ohio State also got 3 forced fumbles, only recovered 2 of them, and they had 2 interceptions. That is the takeaway margin.
How many yards did they have on offense? How many yards did they have on offense? How many yards did they have on offense? I want you to bring that up.
More than the Huskers.
Oh, I believe it is. And guess where yards on offense come from, or yards gain come from? They don't come from the defense.
If you have
how many yards did they have? How many yards did they have?
If you'll let me speak, if you
How many
have
yards
extra
in the air?
possessions, you get extra yardage. That's common sense there, JSL. And so the total yardage for Ohio State was 562 yards.
Okay, that is 200 more yards than the Huskers. You want to know where those points came from? 200 yards on offense. Guess what? How many turnovers did they have? How many turnovers did Ohio State have?
They had 2.
Oh, okay.
So
that
took
was
away,
Western
they had
Kentucky.
4 takeaways,
Western
and
Kentucky
they gave away
should have
2.
won that game. Western Kentucky should have won that game.
No, they still were -2 in the turnover battle there. And all I'm trying to prove to you is that when you get extra takeaways and when you get takeaways and give your team extra possessions, it leads to more points and it leads to a better football team. I don't understand what's so hard for you to grasp on this concept.
Gap between
it's
Ohio
common
State
sense.
Maybe the gap between Ohio State and Western Kentucky is just bigger than the gap between Nebraska and NIU. And another thing, you are saying that to win the game, the defense needs to learn how to get takeaways. That is not how you win a game. You want to know how you win a game? You keep the other team out of the end zone. And that is what this defense has been doing very successfully.
Now, what's your excuse for our offense?
Our offense is giving the ball away. So that is turnovers. That is not our defense out there going, We got to get more
so the offense
takeaways
is
because
giving the ball
so
away,
because
and
you're right.
that's
You're right. Because we have Jeff Sims as our quarterback, our defense needs to account for that and get 6 turnovers a game if we want to compete.
I never said they needed to get 6 turnovers.
You're right.
All I'm saying
7.
is they need to start
7.
forcing takeaways.
So that is not what the game comes down to. It should not have to come down to turnovers. You should already win the game. Why? Because you were getting stops and holding them out of the end zone like the Huskers did against NIU, like they did against Colorado for a half, except for, Colorado starts with the ball in the red zone already. Why? Because Jeff turns the ball over. Sims is the quarterback. And guess what happened against Minnesota? The defense held Minnesota to 13 points. Held Minnesota. Our offense couldn't score more than 10 points. Guess what that comes down to? 4 turnovers. And you're going to come out here and blame the defense for not getting 6 turnovers that they lost that game?
I don't know why
that is outrageous. The defense is the only.
Your logic is outrageous. How can you say that a defense taking the ball away doesn't help? How does that make any sense?
It does help. I'm not saying it doesn't help, but
you're
saying that is what
discredited takeaways completely. Oh, you don't need takeaways. You just hold them out of the offense. You just hold them out of the end zone.
I guess you need takeaways if your quarterback is Jeff Sims.
80 yards.
If your quarterback is Jeff Sims, then yes, you need takeaways. But you shouldn't have to account for that. This is your offense not being able to hold on to the ball, turning the ball over 4 times. They turned the ball over against Minnesota, and Minnesota only put up 13 points. And you're going to come out here and blame the defense on that game.
Outrageous me saying we lost to a terrible Minnesota team.
You're right. 100% the defense's fault. I am so sorry. I did not.
When did I put all the onus on the defense?
I must have not watched the right game. I was watching the wrong game because the defense
didn't get put all the onus on the defense.
Because Ty Robinson didn't get 7 interceptions there, T-So. That's why we lost the game.
Now, J-So, it sounds to me like you started drinking some Roulette or something over the weekend. I thought you were on the train. You were choo-choo. Did you get off at the next stop? Because you were offering to pick me up at the next stop. It sounds more like you got off the train.
I am still on the train. Why? Because Jeff Sims is still listed as the starting quarterback when he comes back. Jeff turns the ball over. Sims is still the quarterback, so it's hard to win games. You're right, BSul. If Jeff turns the ball over, Sims is going to be the quarterback. You got to account for those and get 7 turnovers a game on defense and learn how to get the ball back. Why? Because holding them out of the end zone, guess what? That's not going to do anything when your offense can't even get in the end zone.
Well, J-So, you just got to get it through your thick skull that our defense doesn't get the takeaways that you're expecting.
It doesn't matter. You do not have to get the takeaways if you're holding the other team out of the end zone. Your offense needs to learn how to score. Your offense needs to learn how to not turn it over.
Whatever you think on this subject, our defense will not and does not get the takeaways. That we will probably get another interception against Louisiana Tech, but then we're pretty much done for the season, except for maybe a random 2 against Iowa.
You want to know where the issue is coming from then there, T-So? It's not the defense not getting takeaways. It's the offense giving takeaways.
The offense has nothing to do with the defense.
We're not even talking about the offense giving the ball away right now. All we're saying is that the defense needs to be able to force takeaways.
Okay. If you want to be elite, you got to be able to take the ball away.
You do not have to take the ball away to win a game. You hold them out of the end zone.
Not to win a game, to be elite. There's a difference.
Oh yeah, because a 1-2 team, that's how every elite team starts.
J-So, did you tune into the Colorado game this past weekend? Because if Shiloh Sanders didn't get a pick 6, Colorado would have lost. So it would be nice if Nebraska had a Shiloh Sanders out there.
They were a 24-point favorite. Maybe they're just overrated.
I doubt that. And I also want to tell you,
can go a different way every time.
Oh, that's why the number 19 team in the country opens up as a 20.5-point dog.
J-So, I think the country's about to find out that Colorado's for real when they take Colorado off the field. Let's just remember, Colorado barely beat
19.
Texas Tech. How good is Texas Tech? Patrick Mahomes isn't playing there
anymore.
I
believe you're trying to talk about Oregon, but we can go back on this subject anyways. How is the number 19 team in the country a 20.5-point dog? However, the number 22 team who's going against the number 11 team is only a 7.5-point dog. How does this even make sense to you? How does it make sense? Why? Because
Um,
ESPN is all over Colorado. So is everyone else in the media. It is ridiculous. Colorado is overrated. They are unclassy and unsportsmanship. And guess what? They are going to lose this week against Oregon. USC is going to beat them. Utah is going to beat them. And Colorado is not going to be playing for the Pac-12 championship. They will make a bowl game. Guess what? They're better than expectations.
I agree.
Who cares?
With
They already
you,
hit those wins.
But let's stop talking about
I
Colorado.
don't.
This isn't.
I don't agree
this
with
isn't
them.
This isn't your tape for an interview at ESPN, JSul. Nobody cares
Well, I would
about
already
Colorado.
I would
None
have
of our
already been
listeners
told to leave.
care about Colorado.
If that was the tape I went in for at ESPN, I would have already been told to leave. Because if you're not on your knees for Colorado, you can't work at ESPN, clearly.
Well,
I
JSul,
agree, but they are a 21-point dog against
There's
the
a
number
big
10
reason.
team in the country. That
There's
is
a-
a reason.
there's
Okay,
a big
so the
reason
number
why you
10
should be
against the
buying
number
Colorado
19.
stock
So,
against Oregon.
hold up.
One
Hold
big
up.
reason.
Number 10 team against the number 19 team is a bigger gap than the number 11 team versus the number 22 team. Is that what you just told me?
JSul, I'm telling you this.
No,
There's
I'm
one
asking
reason
BSul.
you should
Is
be
that what you just
buying.
told me? BSul, that is what you just
There's
said.
one
So the
reason
number
you should be buying.
the number 10 team versus the number 19 team, that's a 20.5-point spread right there. The number 11 team versus the number 22 team, that is a 7.5-point spread. That makes sense to you.
Take Colorado with the
It's
points.
actually dropped a little bit more, but
Okay, what is it then? What is it there, BSul?
it's a 4.5-point spread now.
Oh, even better. So the number 11 team to the number 22 team is 4.5, but the number 10 to number 19 is 20.5-point dogs. Why? It is because Colorado was overrated. And guess what? Even if they lose this game, they might move up in the rankings.
You know,
Depends how you
JSul,
lose
for
it.
the first time,
They just
all
almost
episode-
lost to a winless team.
Yeah, for the first time,
Of
this whole
a group
episode,
of 5.
he's making a lot of sense right now.
Who is?
That doesn't make any sense. I told you from the get-go, though, JSul, I'm not a believer in Colorado. I think Colorado ends with a max of 6 or 7 wins.
So you're telling me I make sense. You're telling me I make
I
sense.
did just tell you that. Yes.
Thank
JSul,
you.
weren't
Okay,
you
now let's
arguing
flip
that
it back to the
Colorado was a
turnovers.
minimum of a New Year's Six team last week?
Who's
And
that?
JSul did. He
I
said that
never
Colorado
s-
was a New Year's Six
What?
team.
I believe that was you, T-Cell. You said buy into the Deion hype, and everybody get aboard that.
I'm
and
telling
buy
you.
in.
Listen, here's the argument for you, JSul. There's one argument as to why you should be buying into Colorado right now. Shadir Sanders, the guy is legit. He's a monster of a quarterback. And if you think
He's
Colorado's
He's
if you think-
classless.
I don't care what he is. He's a good football player. Okay?
He's
And
an average
I'll tell you this.
quarterback.
I'll tell
Average
you.
at best.
Oh yeah.
He throws
okay.
the
When's
ball-
the last time?
he throws the
when's
ball
the last time you
60
seen an
times a
average
game.
quarterback throw 1,200 yards, 10 touchdowns, 1 pick? When's the last time you seen an average quarterback do that?
Sam Bradford.
I don't think Nebraska's ever
Landry
seen a quarterback
Jones.
do that. When's the last time Nebraska's had a quarterback like that? So Jay, so you'd
Nebraska
rather
doesn't
play
throw the
Jeff
ball,
Sims
Sam.
than
They're
Shadir
comparing
Sanders.
Two completely different
This
things.
is ridiculous. He throws the ball 60 times a game, and no, he should not have been, the
All right.
quarterback of the week last week. Go look at Michael Penix's junior
Jeff
stats
Sims.
because he is better. Michael Penix Jr. is better than Shadir Sanders.
But you're arguing two elite quarterbacks. So you have a
You're
Here we go.
legit
arguing
case
So I
there.
elite
can't be right.
quarterback versus an
I
average
can't be right.
quarterback.
Yeah, I can't be right. I can't
So,
be right because
Jay,
either
so
way, you're just going to
your
think
argument,
one way.
Jay, so your argument, let's go let Jeff Sims throw the ball 60 times next week, and we'll see what happens. He's bound to throw 10 touchdowns and 1 pick, right? Bound to.
It's not even what I said. Then
What I'm
already know
telling you
how
is
I-
this.
You already know how I feel about Jeff throws a pick Sims. Second of all, yes, if you put Jeff Sims on that team, I think he would be better at throwing the ball. Why? Because Colorado has some of the top wide receivers and athletes in college football at this time. It would be easy. And guess what? It's not like Shadir is out there throwing against
Jeff
some
Sims would have crapped himself on
wildly
Colorado.
talented. Jeff
He
Sims
couldn't handle that
is playing-
pressure.
Whatever.
Every game with
Whatever.
pressure,
You're ridiculous.
which is
Go
the
get on
games we played, he
Deion's
just
train
dropped
then.
the football.
Go get on Deion's train. Where are your sunglasses at tonight, huh?
I already got him in the mail, baby. And let me tell you this, Jason. Okay, the reason why Colorado is a big dog against Oregon is
Why?
because now
Because they're overrated.
they're starting to judge and think that these wins actually don't mean anything. They're looking at
Because they don't.
Colorado. But you and I both know that
They were
Nebraska's a better team than the record
24
shows.
and a half point favorite, 24 and a half point favorite, and they went into double overtime. And the only reason they beat Colorado State is because Colorado State, who was locking down the wide receivers of Colorado, decided to go into a prevent, which allowed Shadir Sanders to hit the wide receivers like Jimmy Horn and let Jimmy Horn to do magic with his legs. If you're going to let Jimmy Horn get out there and put some, moves on you, guess what? You're not going to be able to keep up with them. Why? Because Colorado State's talent is not at the level of Colorado's athletes that they brought in. However, they do not play disciplined football. They are not a good football team. They have athletes. I would call them showcase players, but they are not a good team. They are going to lose to Oregon. That is why they are a 20 and a half point dog when they are a ranked team, which is outrageous. They're not even going against the number one team in the country.
So, Jason,
now
then your argument would be
and-
that the Texas Longhorns are the best team in the country then, because they're the only team who has yet to play a close game. Is that what you're saying? Because Florida State almost lost to Boston College. They probably should have lost to Boston College.
I would say that they should have lost to Boston College if it wasn't for 18 penalties. Now, don't get me wrong.
Did you tune into the Georgia game this weekend?
Boston College could just be a very undisciplined team. However, I think, the ACC refs all of a sudden started to panic when they knew their team in Clemson has already got a loss. If they want to get into the college football playoff, they are going to need an undefeated or one-loss team. And guess what? Florida State is their ticket to the playoff. Florida State is going to get all of the calls.
Did you tune in?
Yes, I did
tune in to Georgia.
Georgia is not
against a terrible South Carolina team.
Georgia is not as good as they were the past 2 years. I don't know why that's so hard for you to understand. So then you wouldn't rank them number one? No.
So who's your number one team?
Texas. They beat Alabama. Oh, you're right. Why isn't Colorado ranked number one?
Bama didn't even come out west last year. LSU was better than Bama last season. And I would expect LSU's better than them again this year.
That is why LSU got obliterated by Florida State.
Because Florida State's legit, Jason.
Yep.
Every
Boston
team's allowed
College
to have
is
one
even
game.
more legit.
They won.
Boston College is even more legit. They shouldn't have won.
That stakes our claim because they played a close game with Northern Illinois. So that stakes Nebraska's claim as elite. You just remember that.
18 penalties. Texas should be the number one team. They beat a highly ranked Alabama team.
As they were supposed to win. It wasn't an upset. They were supposed to win that game.
You're right. Colorado should be number one in the country.
No, you know what, Jason? Penn State should be number one because they beat Illinois 30-13, as they should have done. But you know what? They thought it was kind of hard to play in Champaign. It was a little chilly that night they played.
This is just an outrageous take because I called Deion a terrible coach.
What? How do you think he's a terrible coach? He's 3-0.
Okay, now it's all come full circle back to the stupid Pac-4 nobody cares about.
He hasn't
Why
played
don't we
a team
get back
that's
on
above
topic
500
here and talk about what surprised you guys out of the Big Ten this past week?
Colorado hasn't beaten a team over 500. Congratulations, TCU.
TCU is 2-1. Their only loss is Colorado, and I bet you it stays that way for a while.
Because TCU is a top 10 team now.
Nebraska's only loss is Colorado.
No, it's not.
Yeah. We didn't lose to Minnesota. Our offensive coordinator lost to Minnesota because he's an idiot. We didn't lose to Minnesota. There's no reason at all we lost to Minnesota. I'm not giving them credit for a win. They didn't beat us. We literally threw a pick and fumbled the ball at midfield to give them 2 field goals to win. Am I right or am I right? They didn't beat us out there.
It's still a loss on the schedule.
Not according to me. I wrote it as a W on my sheet.
And just like that, the Huskers are undefeated.
So what do you think about Florida, Jason? Do you think Florida's the best team in the country now because they beat Tennessee?
I never said I thought Tennessee was all that great. They're an SEC team. There's something called the SEC bias.
Well, they're not going to have that this year. They're dropping every game.
Yes, exactly. Texas beat Alabama, and Alabama is a good team. Alabama beats the Huskers. Alabama beats Colorado.
Probably not.
Oh my, this is now it's just getting outrageous.
Where do you get that? I bet you that's an entertaining game, Alabama versus Colorado. I bet you it is.
Just like Colorado State, Colorado was entertaining.
So Alabama's on the downtrend.
Colorado State is the favorite if they take on Alabama. You are right.
It's different in a rivalry game.
Alabama's probably a 20.5-point dog against Colorado State.
How many times do you see your Chicago Bears show up against the Green Bay Packers, Jason?
Well, they're not my Chicago Bears, and we're not even talking about the NFL. You're just bringing in terrible analogies. Why? It's because your point makes 0 sense.
It makes a lot of sense. A rivalry game, anything happens in it. Last year, a 4-win Nebraska team beat an 8-win Iowa team.
So are you betting on Georgia Tech to upset Georgia?
That's not even a true rivalry game.
Anything happens. If they play on rivalry weekend, anything happens.
I don't care if they play on rivalry weekend. That's not Georgia's rival. If you go around to Georgia and ask them who the rival is, they're going to point to Florida. That's going to be the first team they point to.
And you think Colorado goes ahead and points at Colorado State as their rival?
Yes. They have a name of the rivalry. It's called the Rocky Mountain Rivalry. There's a name to the rivalry. It means something.
Yep, and the broken chair between Nebraska and Minnesota is the biggest rivalry in college football.
That's a Twitter rivalry.
They have a name.
That's a Twitter rivalry.
They have a name for it.
Iowa State is a better example. Iowa should beat Iowa State 100% of the time, but they don't because Iowa State shows up to play Iowa. That's why they beat them last year. Iowa State is one of the worst teams in college football.
Terrible take.
They're on par with Kansas as two of the worst teams in all of college sports. And probably Illinois fans who think that the Kansas loss is a good loss are delusional because Kansas is literally one of the worst teams in all college sports except for basketball. Jason, would you rather lose to Colorado State or Kansas?
I don't even know how we got here, to be
Because
honest. It's hard to follow
Colorado State.
It's hard to follow when you were talking.
You know the answers. You'd rather lose to Colorado State than Kansas. Hey,
no,
you're not wrong. I would too.
I would rather lose to a Power 5 school.
They're not a Power 5 team.
Yes, they are. They play in the Big 12.
Barely.
They play in the Big 12.
Barely.
Okay, the Huskers barely play in the Big 10. So Illinois barely plays in the Big 10.
That's not true.
How is that not true?
Indiana barely plays in the Big 10, and so does Illinois, not Nebraska.
How not? Nebraska has lost to Illinois the past 3 years.
We've been to a Big 10 championship game. Do you forget that? Do you have short-term memory loss? We came into the Big 10 and we're a good team. And because of Sean Eichhorst, he dug that team and tore them apart, hiring Sprinkles and then Scott Frost, who gives a damn Frost. Is pretty much what his name is. What it comes down to for me, I would rather lose to a MAC team. I would rather lose to a MAC team than Kansas.
You have the worst takes I have ever heard in my life.
You do. Because you don't believe in Colorado and you should. Colorado's a great team.
I would rather lose to SMU than Colorado State.
Now that makes no sense.
How does that not make sense? The SMU is on the same caliber as Colorado State, and they are a better team.
According to who?
Colorado State has how many wins this year, T-Cell? How many points were they the favorite by? How many points was Colorado favored by? 24 and a half.
It's a rivalry. I'm telling you, it's a rivalry.
You gave up. This is 24 and a half points is outrageous to go to double overtime.
How big of a favorite was Nebraska? How big of a favorite was TCU? Upsets happen, Jason. Get it through your thick skull. Teams show up to play in the spotlight.
Nebraska was not favored in that game.
I believe over the summer we were like an 18.5-point favorite.
When the game
and we lost by like
fruition,
30 points.
So what the game opens up as is what the spread is.
Okay, fine. No, Colorado was a 7-point favorite and they beat us by 30. Are you happy?
Okay, so they didn't get upset then.
So are you happy? Are you happy losing by 30 points?
Yes, you proved my point. You proved my point.
Okay, I'm just glad to know that you're happy losing by 30 points.
Yeah, I'm glad we lost to, your so-called national championship caliber team who
I
is
never
a
said that.
20.5-point dog. 20.5-point dog.
Jay, so all the people who believe in Oregon
You have
are
no comeback to
delusional.
that. You have zero comeback. I
Look,
mean, Vegas
USC is an
is
argument.
clearly so.
USC is an argument.
So
Now
the people that
Oregon,
make the spreads, the people that
not
create the spreads in
Utah.
Vegas, the people that create the spreads in Vegas are stupid because BSul thinks so.
They
Is that
get
what
it
you're
wrong
saying?
sometimes. They get it wrong sometimes.
So I mean, clearly they got it wrong last week with Colorado. That is why Colorado is a 20.5-point dog. You're gonna be off the Deion train here next week when Colorado beats them.
Okay. If Colorado wins, who's getting off the train then? Then they would be 4-0.
Geez, so I'm not out here saying Oregon is the best team. They're still a 20.5-point favorite, though, so they should mollywop.
Okay, Jason,
Colorado.
if Colorado beats Oregon, I expect you to go out there and buy a Deion t-shirt. It doesn't have to be a Colorado t-shirt.
That.
It'll be a Deion t-shirt. Well,
nope.
What do you have to be scared of? Because Oregon's going to mollywop them.
I would even
and you have to wear it
the
next week on the podcast. If Oregon beats, or if Colorado beats Oregon, you have to buy a Deion t-shirt and wear it next week at the podcast.
No.
Yeah. That right there is why they shouldn't be a 22-point favorite, because you have no confidence picking Oregon to beat them.
They're only a 20.5-point favorite.
Okay, exactly why they shouldn't be a 20.5-point favorite. What do you have to lose? They're 20.5, easy win. You won't have to buy a Deion t-shirt.
Because I don't care about what happens in that game.
The truth comes out because you're nervous, because you know that Oregon doesn't deserve to be a 20-point favorite over Colorado. And you're not confident Colorado's not going to win. They should have lost last week,
They
Jason.
get
I'm with
every
you.
call.
They should have lost.
They get every... Did you see any of the flags? They get every single call.
So you don't think that Oregon is worthy of a 20-point favorite?
I am not betting against the refs in college football when everyone has seen in and out from every single game that the refs change the outcome of college football games.
So there you go, Scoopers. You have it. BSul isn't... I'm not even telling him to cover the spread with 20 points. I'm just saying Colorado wins, which would be a 20-point
I do not
underdog.
care about Colorado. I do not care about Colorado versus Oregon.
It shouldn't
I'm
matter
just saying,
if the people in Vegas aren't idiots, according to you. Well, based on that amount of time between then and that answer, I'm going to guess that BSul also has no faith in Oregon to beat Colorado, as nobody really should at this point in time. But, as we jump into the Big Ten games around the country and see how they panned out, there's just no real surprise games for me. I think for me, every game this week panned out the way you expected. I expected Penn State to pummel Illinois. I expected Washington to come in and bully Michigan State. You could say maybe the score was the most surprising there. I mean, Minnesota's a solid unit, but ultimately North Carolina is probably going to be a top 10 team in the country when it's all said and done. So, watching them beat up on Minnesota was very much expected on my end. Northwestern doesn't even have a football team. And, some people might be surprised that Syracuse beat Purdue. But then when you really think about it, Purdue is absolutely horrible. So that one really shouldn't shock you at all. To me, there's no shocking games in the Big Ten. I think everything panned out the way you expected. Even Rutgers beating Virginia Tech, because that's Purdue's only win. And Purdue is one of the bottom feeders this year, it looks like.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, BSul. I think all the games went the way they probably should have. I would have said the most surprising thing was probably Iowa scoring 41 points this past week. That's a far cry from a normal Brian Ferentz offense.
I do want to say something that was kind of surprising was Wisconsin pulling away at the end against Georgia Southern. Mind you, this was a close game, a one-score game into the fourth quarter. While Georgia Southern lost the game against Wisconsin, this game came down to 6 turnovers Georgia Southern gave away while they were driving. Georgia Southern had way more yards than Wisconsin. Georgia Southern should have probably came away in this game victorious like they did against the Huskers last year. However, they did not find a way to come out on top in this game while scoring 14 points. They had 455 yards on offense.
Yeah, and just looking around the Big Ten, it just seems like the Big Ten isn't at its full power potential this season. It seems like the teams that are battle tested have lost those tests, and the larger teams who are supposed to be, revving, getting ready for the playoffs and revving their engines, like Michigan, decided to play teams like Bowling Green instead of actually jogging out and playing a Power 5 unit. And so, based on what I'm seeing around the Big Ten this year, I'm expecting the Big Ten to either miss the playoff altogether or have another terrible showing and be one and done in the playoff. If a team like Michigan or Ohio State or Penn State runs the table with like just the watered down Big Ten this year. So any of our betting people out there, I would say bet on the Fighting Irish this week against Ohio State. I just think the Big Ten has a down year this year. Ohio State isn't fully certain on their quarterback play. And ultimately, Notre Dame has a Heisman contender playing for them. They got a good one who transferred in there. So I fully suspect Notre Dame to beat Ohio State this week, and it might be ugly.
Now, T-Cell, does that mean that you've got the Golden Domers replacing Michigan in your Final Four predictions?
If I redid my predictions, I think that's the way that I would do it. And I would also lean. It's just one of those weird years because the SEC is losing all their matchups and the Big Ten is losing all their matchups or avoiding them altogether. Michigan. So it's one of those weird years for me. So, because I like my pick of USC, but Washington looks really tough. So I kind of want to lean Washington if I was repicking them, but I mean, USC is still a solid pick. Florida State looks like a lock to me at this point. Notre Dame looks like a lock to me at this point. And I don't know if I love my LSU pick, but if they run the table and beat Georgia in the championship, I suspect that LSU will get in at that point. But, if they lose to Bama, they're out. And ultimately, Bama might have already been eliminated losing to Texas in the first place. Jason, what do you think about the playoff? Because I think all the teams you picked have already been eliminated.
Yeah, not a hot start for me, but I'll tell you what, if my teams just won their games, they would be sitting pretty.
Now, T-Cell, I would not say J-Cell is 0 for 4 yet. He's still got Ohio State picked. However, that dream could come crashing down pretty quick this weekend against Notre Dame.
However, if they beat Notre Dame, I still think they have an opportunity to get into the playoff if they run the table and go undefeated and win the Big Ten championship.
Yes, an undefeated Ohio State team would get in, J-Cell. I would agree with you on that.
A one-loss Ohio State team would get into the playoff.
J-Cell, here's my hot take for you then, because I still don't think Ohio State.
I don't think Notre Dame there, BSul.
I doubt it. The Big Ten's not strong enough to get a one-loss team in. The Big Ten's going to have to be undefeated.
I believe he was saying a one-loss Ohio State and then also a one-loss Notre Dame.
No, I'm saying a one-loss Ohio State team would get into the playoff.
I think a one-loss Notre Dame team gets in over a one-loss Ohio State team.
I agree. It probably depends on that game, though.
If you look at Notre Dame's schedule here, you think Notre Dame, okay, they beat Ohio State, then they beat Duke. You go down, and then let's say they lose to USC, but it's a close game. If that's their only loss, they're in.
Well, it depends how strong USC. I mean, if USC at that point is the third best team in the Pac-12, I don't see the argument to put Notre Dame in there.
Depends what the separation is between the rest of the Pac-12 teams there.
But here's my hot take that I just decided to come up with for this week, and this one's aimed at J-Sol and his last team he's got hanging on by a thread there at Ohio State. Here's my hot take for you, J-Sol. If Ohio State beats Notre Dame this week, I bet you they have a letdown game the following week. And you know who they play the following week? Oh, wait, actually, it looks like they got a bye week. Let's see. They got a bye week and then a letdown game after their bye week. And you know who they play after that? Maryland. Book it. But that's only if they lose to Notre Dame. Or, I mean, if they beat Notre Dame.
No, I can't say I'm getting on board with that hot take, as I do not see Maryland upsetting Ohio State.
Well, then that means that Notre Dame is going to beat Ohio State.
So that means a hot take of yours would be coming true.
So I'm telling you, it's one way or the other. After October 7th, Ohio State will have at least one loss.
And I disagree with that hot take.
Now, I would have had a TSL type hot take going into this game, going into this week. However, I will say it's a little more concerning now that Casey Thompson did confirm a torn ACL for Florida Atlantic, because I would have told you Florida Atlantic was going into Champaign and would come out with a victory over Illinois this week.
I'd still book that one.
It still is doable, but losing Casey is going to be huge for them to try and replace him.
I would still lean at picking that upset, because based on what I've seen with the Big Ten this year, they're dropping games all over the place. And the only team who's dropped games so far to opponents that are actually good is Nebraska. And since we lost to Minnesota, but I put it as a dub on my sheet because there's no reason at all that we lost. And then Colorado, who's been a good team. And Purdue's been trying to argue that Fresno's better than what everyone thinks, but I'm still not sipping on that Kool-Aid.
Yeah, I would agree with you, TSL. I don't know that Fresno was all that good to begin with anyway. Purdue looks like they're going to be in trouble, and I don't think they've got a shot this week playing Wisconsin, especially on I believe it's a Friday night game there.
You see, I actually kind of do give Purdue a chance because I think that Wisconsin is just very overrated. I think Wisconsin's getting all the favoritism. They got the easiest schedule in the West, and I think they're going to fumble with, the schedule and everything on the line. I don't think Wisconsin is a very good football team at all this season. I mean, losing to Washington State is the period on that statement for me.
Yeah, I can't say that I got, Wisconsin covering the points here and, beating Purdue by 6 points. Now, Purdue was not good by any standards, but neither is Wisconsin. I mean, it's two new head coaches, two new quarterbacks, two new systems, two new everything. And this is going down on the road for Wisconsin, who has had to pull away late against a Buffalo team and a Georgia Southern team. And Purdue has lost to Fresno State this year, which is not a good loss by any standards. And therefore, I think that this could be a very close game. It could be a coin flip at the end of the game.
I agree. And I mean, looking at Wisconsin's defense, they don't look to be as strong as what I think Wisconsin has been used to for the last couple of years, because they decided not to hire their stud defensive coordinator as their head coach, and that might come around and bite them this season.
Well, I sure think it's going to bite them for one game when it becomes it's personal for Illinois versus Wisconsin.
Why is that personal?
Because that is where Jim Leonard went. He's on Illinois coaching.
With Bielema?
Yes.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to have panned out very well so far for the Fighting Illini. Leonard might be arguing his side that it takes more than a year to shore up their defense. But giving up 28 to Toledo is pathetic.
He's an analyst for them. He's not their defensive coordinator.
So he's their defensive analyst.
Well, you would have to ask Scott Frost what an analyst does to make sure you're correct in it, or counting it the right way. As we all know, Scott Frost got caught for cheating with his analysts.
But all I know is this week we've had a lot of back and forth with a lot of Illinois fans, and they seem to think that their losses are justified. And I just can't find it in myself to justify a loss to Kansas and giving up 34 points to Kansas.
I would agree with you, T-Sol. I think Kansas is much improved these last 2 years than they had been in years past. However, it's still Kansas, just like it's still Illinois. You're talking about two programs that have not been relevant in years. And so all of a sudden they get a taste of what it's like to be somewhat relevant. And now they think any loss that they suffer is justified.
Yeah, I'm looking at Kansas's schedule, and I think they'll be lucky to go 6-6, or maybe that's where I'm projecting them to go. I don't see them going 7-5. 5-7 is possible. I think 6-6 is likely for the Jayhawks since they beat Illinois, but I think these next 5 weeks is going to be a rough 5 week for any Jayhawk fan. I'm looking at their schedule. I expect them to lose to BYU this week because I expect BYU to be in the Big 12 championship game this year. Because BYU is a better program than what most people think, and the Big 12 is a pretty terrible conference. So I expect BYU to go in there and make noise right away. So I expect them to lose to BYU, lose to Texas, lose to Central Florida, lose to Oklahoma State, lose to Oklahoma. In that order, 5 in a row.
Now, if the Jayhawks do get lucky enough to pull off 6 wins here, T-Sol, how would you feel about them taking on a Colorado team who will also probably have that 6 or 7 wins in bowl season?
I think you would be crazy to project Colorado with 6 wins. I think 6 wins is a guarantee for Colorado at this point. And, unless more injuries happen to them or something crazy happens. I mean, coming out of the Pac-12, they're guaranteed 6 wins at this point. But that means it's time. We got to start previewing our game this week against Louisiana Tech. And I know it's another one that, gets us out of bed in the morning as we get up ready to play the Louisiana Tech whatevers, Exciting.
The Bulldogs, T-Sol. They are the Bulldogs.
Yeah. More like the puppy dogs after we get done with them. For me, for me coming into this game, it's going to just sit strictly on the quarterback situation. I don't care that we got new running backs coming out there. They should be able to run over whoever Louisiana Tech is jogging out. For me, it's all about the quarterback play. And ultimately, if they don't run Harburg out there, I'm not going to be a happy fan sitting at home. I think Sims has been benched officially in my book since Harburg went out there and got a win. Sims is benched in my book until Harburg shows, hey, he needs to come out for Sims.
I don't know that I would go as far to tell you that Sims is benched. I could see them trotting him out this week against Louisiana Tech if he's healthy. It could be a perfect get-right game to give him an opportunity to get on page with some of these receivers and build some chemistry. However, that would be a disaster-ridden game, in my opinion. Nebraska should not come out and should not throw the ball. This should be a run the ball game. This should be control the clock, stick it on the ground, and just keep it there. Louisiana Tech is averaging, their defense gives up 200 yards on the ground. Nebraska should blow by that this week. It doesn't matter who's at quarterback, who's at running back. This team should be at least 300 yards on the ground by the end of the game.
And just by that statement, BSul has not been watching the plays Satterfield is calling, because I believe that the Huskers are going to come out and try to put up over 200 yards through the air against the Louisiana Tech. As BSul said, the Dogs, never even heard of them. However, I think that the Huskers are going to come out. They're going to try to pass the ball aggressively, and it's not really going to work out for them that well. I think going into half, the Huskers could go into half either very close or a one-score game going into half. And when they come back out, if it is not changed and they do not go, to a running offense or a running style, hand the ball off, try to run the clock, I think this game could come down to, a 1-2 score game at the end, but I still think the Huskers are going to pull it out. Hopefully, you would think Satterfield's going to run the ball, especially when Louisiana Tech has given up over 200 yards, just like BSul said. However, the Huskers are only giving up 46 yards on the ground. I expect Louisiana Tech to come out and try to pass the ball very frequently, and I think the Huskers are coming away with 2 pretty big interceptions.
I like it. BSul's on here talking about the Husker defense getting some takeaways finally.
Yes, but I'm not saying that's what the game is coming down to, is the takeaways.
Well, my guess here is I think the Huskers are going to come out, have another 200+ yard rushing day, and have 4 rushing touchdowns amongst everybody in the group. So Harbaugh might have a couple, Sims might have 1 or 2, depending on who they play. Emmett Johnson might have it. Anthony Grant might get 1. That's my guess. 4 rushing touchdowns at least.
Now, who are you guys thinking against Louisiana Tech is going to be the player of the game? Who do you think is going to just show up and be the best player for the Huskers? Could be offense, could be defense. Who do you think it's going to be?
I'm going with Ty Robinson on the defense. I think defensive line is owning the game for Nebraska, and I think 3-star Ty is going to become 4-star Ty in this game.
I'm going to stick with the defensive line as well, but I got to go with Nash will smash this Louisiana Tech front 5.
Listen, I like both your guys' picks here. I think the D-line should get a lot of pressure here, especially it seems like Louisiana Tech wants to throw the ball. They have more yards in their games passing than they do running, and it's not close at the split. However, it would not surprise me if coming out of this game, everybody looks back as this being the Anthony Grant is back show. He could easily put up 150 yards himself against this defense, and it will lead everybody to be at the same point that T-Cell was last year when he said, run this guy for Heisman. I'm hoping he's got the ball security skills back, but if he can do that, it could be a perfect recipe to give the kids some confidence before Michigan comes to town.
Yeah, and we're just talking about back-to-back terrible offensive coordinators. Mark Whipple didn't know, he couldn't hit water if it fell out of a boat with his play calling.
Yeah, Whipple is somebody that I don't think we want to relive at all.
Hey, thanks for joining us for another week of the Sully Scoop. You're here with BSul.
BSul.
And T-Cell.
And don't forget to follow and like and leave a comment on Twitter at Sully_Scoop to be on the Grandstand Gossip. But don't forget you can listen to us on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. And you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Go Big Red.